Chapter 1: The Trail of Tears and Blood. The Santa Fe Trail was one of the most important trade routes in the American frontier. Stretching over 800 miles from Missouri to Santa Fe, New Mexico, the trail connected the eastern United States to the Mexican territories. For over 50 years, from 1821 to the 1880s, merchants, settlers, and adventurers traveled this dangerous route, seeking fortune and new opportunities. But the Santa Fe Trail was not a safe place. The route passed through vast deserts, through territories controlled by Native American tribes, through areas where the law had no jurisdiction. Caravans were attacked by bandits, travelers died of thirst and exposure, entire wagon trains disappeared without a trace. But there was something else, something that the official records didn't document. Something that the merchants and settlers spoke about in hushed tones around campfires, something that made even the bravest travelers nervous as they approached certain sections of the trail. There were places on the Santa Fe Trail where caravans would disappear, not attacked by bandits, not lost to the desert, but cursed. Doomed, destroyed by something that couldn't be explained by conventional means. The first documented account of this phenomenon dates back to 1847, during the Mexican-American War. A military supply caravan, consisting of 20 wagons and over 100 soldiers, was traveling from Missouri to Santa Fe. The caravan was well armed, well supplied, and led by an experienced commander named Colonel James Harrington. According to the official military records, the caravan left Missouri on schedule, but it never arrived in Santa Fe. Weeks passed. The military grew concerned. Search parties were sent out to find the caravan, and what they found was shocking. The caravan was discovered in a remote section of the trail about 200 miles from Santa Fe, but there was no sign of battle, no signs of violence, no bodies, no evidence of what had happened. The wagons were still there, but they were empty. The supplies were untouched. The weapons were still loaded. It was as if the entire caravan had simply vanished, leaving behind only their possessions. But there was one clue, a clue that would haunt the investigation for years to come. Written on the side of the lead wagon, in what appeared to be blood, were strange symbols, symbols that didn't match any known language, symbols that seemed to writhe and shift in the moonlight as if they were alive. And beneath the symbols, written in English, was a single phrase: "The blood moon has claimed us." The military tried to suppress the story, but word spread. Travelers began to speak of the curse of the Santa Fe Trail. Merchants began to report strange occurrences. Caravans began to report seeing a figure on the trail, a figure that appeared under the light of the full moon, a figure that whispered curses into the night. In 1849, a merchant named Thomas Whitmore was leading a caravan of 30 wagons from Missouri to Santa Fe. Whitmore was an experienced trader, a man who'd made the journey dozens of times. He didn't believe in curses. He didn't believe in supernatural phenomena. He believed only in profit and practicality. But as his caravan approached the section of the trail where Colonel Harrington had disappeared, strange things began to happen. The animals became restless. The horses refused to move forward. The oxen began to bellow and strain against their harnesses. The mules kicked and fought as if trying to flee from something invisible. Whitmore's men became nervous. They spoke of seeing shadows moving in the desert. They spoke of hearing voices whispering in languages they didn't understand. They spoke of feeling watched, observed, judged by something that existed just beyond the edge of perception. And then, on a night when the moon was full and blood red, the figure appeared. According to the account given by one of Whitmore's men, a man named Samuel Cross, the figure emerged from the darkness of the desert. It was a woman, or at least it had the shape of a woman. But there was something wrong about her, something that made the mind recoil, that made the eyes struggle to focus on her form. She was tall, impossibly tall, her body seeming to stretch and shift as she moved. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, as if she were not entirely present in the physical world. Her hair was long and black, moving as if caught in a wind that no one else could feel. And her eyes were the most disturbing feature of all. They were completely black. Not dark brown or deep black, but completely, utterly black. Eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Eyes that seemed to contain an infinite darkness. The woman walked toward the caravan, and as she walked, she began to speak. Her voice was layered, as if multiple voices were speaking simultaneously. Her voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I am the keeper of this trail. I am the guardian of the desert, and you have trespassed on sacred ground. Whitmore tried to respond, but he found that he couldn't speak. It was as if an invisible force was preventing him from making any sound. The woman raised her hands, and she began to chant. The words were in a language that no one recognized. The words seemed to hurt to listen to, as if they were causing physical pain in the ears and minds of those who heard them. And then, as the chanting reached a crescendo, the woman's form began to glow. A sickly, blood-red light emanated from her body, illuminating the entire caravan. And then she was gone. She simply vanished, as if she had never been there at all. But the curse remained. Over the next 3 days, Whitmore's caravan descended into chaos. The animals began to die. The men began to sicken. Fever spread through the camp. Men began to hallucinate, seeing things that weren't there, hearing voices that spoke their names. And then the deaths began. One by one, Whitmore's men died. Some died of fever, some died of apparent heart attacks, some simply stopped breathing, their bodies shutting down for no apparent reason. By the end of the 3rd day, only Whitmore and 3 other men remained alive. Whitmore made a desperate decision. He abandoned the wagons, he abandoned the supplies, and he took the 3 surviving men and rode for Santa Fe as fast as their horses could carry them. They made it. Barely. Whitmore and his men arrived in Santa Fe, broken and traumatized, with a story that no one wanted to believe. But the story spread, and with each telling it grew. The legend of the Blood Moon Witch began to take shape.
Chapter 2. The Witch's Origins. Who was the Blood Moon Witch? Where did she come from? What was the source of her power? These questions haunted historians and researchers for decades. But the answers, when they finally emerged, were far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. In 1885, a historian named Dr. Marcus Webb began researching the legend of the Blood Moon Witch. Webb was a scholar of frontier history, a man who believed that every legend had a basis in historical fact. He spent years traveling the Santa Fe Trail, interviewing survivors, collecting accounts, documenting the pattern of the curse. What Dr. Webb discovered was a story that predated the American frontier by centuries. According to Webb's research, the woman who became the Blood Moon Witch was originally a member of a Native American tribe that had inhabited the Santa Fe region for generations. Her name, in her native language, roughly translated to "she who walks between worlds." She was born around 1800, during a time of great upheaval for Native American tribes. The American government was expanding westward, pushing tribes from their ancestral lands. The Santa Fe Trail was being established, bringing settlers and merchants through territories that had been sacred to Native Americans for centuries. The woman who would become the Blood Moon Witch was a spiritual leader of her tribe. She was a shaman, a keeper of ancient knowledge, a conduit between the physical world and the spiritual realm. She possessed knowledge of ancient rituals, ancient languages, ancient powers that had been passed down through her tribe for generations. But she was also a woman consumed by grief. Her entire family had been killed by settlers. Her tribe had been decimated by disease and violence. Her sacred lands were being desecrated by the arrival of the Santa Fe Trail. According to Webb's research, the woman made a decision. She decided to perform an ancient ritual, a ritual that would bind her spirit to the Santa Fe Trail, a ritual that would give her the power to protect her sacred lands by cursing anyone who dared to travel through them. The ritual was performed on a night when the moon was full and blood red. The woman stood in the center of the trail and performed the ancient ceremony. She chanted in her native language. She made offerings of blood and sacred herbs. She called upon ancient spirits and ancient powers that had been passed down through her tribe for generations. But then something happened that defied explanation. The woman's physical form began to change. Her body began to become translucent, ethereal, as if she was transitioning between the physical world and the spiritual realm. Her eyes became completely black, as if they were absorbing the darkness of the night itself. When the ritual was complete, the woman was no longer entirely human. She had become something else, something that existed between worlds, something that could manifest in the physical realm but was not bound by the laws of the physical world. She had become the Blood Moon Witch. According to Webb's research, the woman's original intention was to protect her sacred lands, but the ritual had twisted her purpose. The ancient powers she'd invoked had corrupted her. The grief and rage that had motivated her had been magnified 1,000-fold. She had become a force of destruction, a force that didn't distinguish between those who meant harm and those who were simply passing through, a force that cursed every caravan, every traveler, every person who dared to use the Santa Fe Trail. But there was something else that Webb discovered. Something that suggested the Blood Moon Witch's curse was not random. Something that suggested she was targeting specific types of people. According to Webb's analysis of the documented cases, the Blood Moon Witch seemed to target caravans that were involved in the displacement of Native Americans. Caravans that were carrying supplies to military forts that were being used to suppress Native American tribes. Caravans that were transporting settlers who were taking Native American lands. In other words, the Blood Moon Witch was not simply cursing travelers, she was cursing those who were complicit in the destruction of her people. But the curse was indiscriminate. It affected not just the guilty, but the innocent as well. Merchants who had no knowledge of the displacement of Native Americans were cursed. Settlers who were simply seeking a better life were cursed. Innocent people who were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time were cursed. The Blood Moon Witch had become a force of vengeance, a force that was trying to protect her people by any means necessary, a force that had lost the ability to distinguish between justice and murder. And the curse continued. Year after year, decade after decade, caravans continued to disappear on the Santa Fe Trail. Travelers continued to report seeing a figure on the trail under the light of the full moon. Merchants continued to speak of strange occurrences and unexplained deaths. By the time Dr. Webb completed his research in 1890, over 200 caravans had been cursed. Over 3,000 people had died. The Santa Fe Trail had become one of the most dangerous routes in America, not because of bandits or the harsh desert, but because of a supernatural force that couldn't be stopped by conventional means. But Webb's research also revealed something else, something that would become crucial to understanding the Blood Moon Witch and eventually to stopping her curse. Webb discovered that the curse was tied to the blood moon. The Blood Moon Witch only appeared when the moon was full and blood red. On other nights, she was dormant, inactive, unable to manifest in the physical world. This discovery would become the key to survival on the Santa Fe Trail. Merchants began to time their journeys to avoid traveling during the full moon. Caravans began to wait in settlements until the moon had waned before continuing their journey. But the curse was not so easily avoided. The Blood Moon Witch had learned to adapt. She had learned to anticipate the merchant's strategies, and she had learned to make the curse more powerful, more devastating, more impossible to escape.
Chapter 3. The Curse Spreads. As the decades passed, the legend of the Blood Moon Witch grew. More and more caravans reported encountering the figure on the trail. More and more travelers reported experiencing the curse. But something was changing. The curse was evolving. The Blood Moon Witch was becoming more powerful, more active, more present in the physical world. In 1865, a woman named Eleanor Hartwell was leading a caravan of 20 wagons from Missouri to Santa Fe. Hartwell was a widow, a woman who'd taken over her late husband's trading business. She was intelligent, capable, and determined to succeed in a man's world. But she was also traveling during a time when the full moon was approaching. Her advisors urged her to wait, to delay her journey until the moon had waned. But Hartwell refused. She had a schedule to keep. She had customers waiting. She refused to be intimidated by what she considered to be superstition. 3 days into her journey, as the moon began to rise full and blood-red over the desert, Hartwell saw the figure. According to Hartwell's own account, which she wrote in her journal and which was discovered after her death, the figure appeared on the trail ahead of the caravan.
The figure was a woman, tall and impossibly thin, her form seeming to shift and waver in the moonlight. But this time, the figure did something different. Instead of approaching the caravan, the figure simply stood on the trail and looked at Hartwell. The figure's black eyes seemed to bore into Hartwell's soul, as if the witch was assessing her, judging her, determining her worthiness. And then the figure spoke. According to Hartwell's journal, the witch said, "You carry the blood of the oppressor. You carry the weight of stolen lands. You carry the guilt of a people displaced. And for this, you will be cursed." Hartwell tried to respond, but she found that she couldn't move. It was as if an invisible force was holding her in place, forcing her to listen to the witch's words. The witch raised her hands, and the blood-red light of the moon seemed to intensify. The light grew brighter and brighter until it was almost blinding. And then the witch began to chant. But this time the chant was different. This time the witch was not chanting in her native language. This time she was chanting in English. And the words she spoke were a curse, a specific curse, a curse directed at Hartwell herself. "You will not die," the witch said, "but you will lose everything you love. You will watch as your caravan is destroyed. You will watch as your people suffer. You will watch as your dreams turn to ash. And you will live, knowing that you could have prevented this disaster by simply listening to the warnings." When the light faded, the witch was gone. But the curse remained. Over the next 3 days, everything that could go wrong did go wrong. The wagons broke down, the animals became sick, the men began to argue and fight amongst themselves. And then, on the third night, a fire broke out in the camp. The fire spread rapidly, consuming wagon after wagon, destroying supplies, killing livestock. By the time the fire was extinguished, half of Hartwell's caravan had been destroyed. Hartwell managed to salvage what remained and continued to Santa Fe, but she was a broken woman. She'd lost half her investment, she'd lost half her men, she'd lost everything she'd worked for. And, according to her journal, she lived the rest of her life knowing that she could have prevented the disaster by simply waiting for the moon to wane. Hartwell's story spread, and it had a profound effect on the merchants and settlers who used the Santa Fe Trail. The legend of the Blood Moon Witch became more than just a story. It became a warning that was taken seriously by everyone who valued their lives and their livelihoods. But the curse continued to evolve. The Blood Moon Witch was learning, she was adapting, she was becoming more powerful. In 1870, a group of settlers led by a man named James Caldwell were traveling to Santa Fe to establish a new settlement. Caldwell had organized over 50 families, over 200 people to make the journey. They were well-armed, well-organized, and determined to establish a new community in the New Mexico territories. Caldwell was aware of the legend of the Blood Moon Witch, but he was a man of science and reason. He didn't believe in curses. He didn't believe in supernatural phenomena. He believed that the disappearances and deaths on the Santa Fe Trail could be explained by natural causes, bandits, disease, the harsh desert environment. So Caldwell decided to challenge the curse. He deliberately timed his journey to coincide with the full blood moon. He wanted to prove that the legend was nothing more than superstition. What happened next was documented by a survivor named Thomas Wright, who later wrote an account of the events for a newspaper in Kansas City. According to Wright's own account, the journey began normally. The settlers made good progress. The weather was favorable. The animals were healthy. Everything seemed to be going well. But as the full moon rose over the desert, everything changed. The settlers began to see things, visions, hallucinations. Each settler saw something different, something personal, something that terrified them. Some saw their dead relatives. Some saw their worst fears manifested in physical form. Some saw things that had no name, things that existed only in nightmares. And then the Blood Moon Witch appeared. But this time she didn't appear as a single figure. This time she appeared as multiple figures, dozens of them, hundreds of them, all the same black eyes, all the same blood-red aura. The witch had multiplied. She had become a legion. The settlers tried to fight. They fired their weapons at the figures, but the bullets passed through them as if they were made of smoke and shadow. The settlers tried to flee, but the figures surrounded them, cutting off all escape routes. And then the figures began to chant, the same ancient words in the same ancient language. The words seemed to cause physical pain, as if they were tearing at the settlers' minds and souls. According to Wright's account, the settlers began to die, not from any physical cause, but from sheer terror. Their hearts simply stopped. Their minds simply shut down. They died of fear. By the time the sun rose over the desert, only a handful of settlers remained alive. The rest had been killed by the curse. The wagons were destroyed. The supplies were scattered. The settlement that Caldwell had dreamed of establishing would never exist. The survivors, including Thomas Wright, fled back to Missouri, and they spread the story of what had happened. They spread the story of the Blood Moon Witch's power. They spread the story of a curse that couldn't be fought, couldn't be escaped, couldn't be overcome. The Santa Fe Trail became increasingly dangerous. Fewer and fewer merchants were willing to risk the journey. Trade began to decline. The economic impact of the curse was becoming significant. And the Blood Moon Witch continued to hunt.
Chapter 4. The Confrontation. By 1875, the situation had become critical. The Santa Fe Trail was becoming unusable. Merchants were refusing to travel it. Settlers were avoiding it. The economic consequences were severe. The territorial government of New Mexico decided that something had to be done. They decided that they needed to confront the Blood Moon Witch directly. They decided that they needed to end the curse no matter what it took. A man named Colonel Edward Blackwood was chosen to lead the expedition. Blackwood was a military officer, a man with experience fighting Native Americans, a man who believed that any problem could be solved through force and determination. Blackwood organized a team of 50 soldiers, all well-armed and well-trained. He also recruited Dr. Marcus Webb, the historian who'd been researching the Blood Moon Witch, to provide guidance and information. The plan was simple. Blackwood and his team would travel the Santa Fe Trail during the full blood moon. They would confront the Blood Moon Witch directly, and they would attempt to capture or kill her, thereby ending the curse. On a night when the moon was full and blood red, Blackwood's expedition set out onto the Santa Fe Trail. For the first 2 days, nothing happened. The soldiers traveled without incident. The animals were calm. There were no signs of the curse.
But on the third night, as the blood-red moon reached its zenith, the blood moon witch appeared. According to Dr. Webb's account, which he recorded in his journal, the witch emerged from the darkness of the desert like a phantom. She was tall, impossibly tall, her form seeming to stretch and shift in the moonlight. Her eyes were completely black, absorbing the light of the moon itself. Blackwood ordered his soldiers to open fire. The soldiers fired hundreds of rounds, their rifles blazing in the darkness, but the bullets passed through the witch as if she was made of smoke and shadow. The witch was unharmed. The witch raised her hands, and the blood-red light of the moon intensified. The light grew so bright that it was almost blinding. And then the witch began to chant. But this time, something different happened. This time the soldiers began to fight amongst themselves. The curse had turned them against each other. Soldiers who'd been comrades moments before were now enemies, attacking each other with knives and fists. Blackwood tried to restore order, but he found that he couldn't. The curse was too powerful. The witch's magic was too strong. According to Dr. Webb's account, Blackwood made a desperate decision. He ordered his soldiers to retreat. He ordered them to flee the trail and return to the nearest settlement. But the witch would not allow them to escape. The witch pursued them, her form multiplying, her power growing. Soldiers fell as they fled, their bodies simply ceasing to function, their minds shutting down under the weight of the curse. By the time Blackwood and the survivors reached the nearest settlement, over half of his soldiers were dead. Blackwood was a broken man. He'd been defeated by a force that couldn't be fought, couldn't be overcome, couldn't be defeated through conventional means. But Dr. Webb had learned something important during the confrontation. He'd learned that the Blood Moon Witch was not invulnerable. He'd learned that the witch had a weakness. According to Webb's analysis, the witch's power was tied to the blood moon. The witch could only manifest fully when the moon was full and blood red. During other times, the witch was dormant, weakened, unable to access the full extent of her power. Webb also discovered something else. He discovered that the witch's curse was not random. The witch was targeting specific people, those who were complicit in the displacement of Native Americans, those who were carrying supplies to military forts, those who were settling on sacred Native American lands. And Webb realized something crucial. The witch was not evil. The witch was not a demon or a force of pure destruction. The witch was a woman who'd been wronged, whose people had been destroyed, whose sacred lands had been desecrated. The witch was seeking justice, even if her methods were brutal and indiscriminate. Webb decided to attempt something that no one else had thought of. Webb decided to try to communicate with the Blood Moon Witch. Webb decided to try to reason with her. Webb decided to try to understand her. On the next full blood moon, Webb traveled to the Santa Fe Trail alone. He brought no weapons, he brought no soldiers, he brought only his knowledge, his understanding, and his compassion. And he waited for the Blood Moon Witch to appear. When the witch emerged from the darkness of the desert, Webb didn't run. Webb didn't fight. He simply stood there and waited. The witch approached Webb, her black eyes boring into his soul. The witch raised her hands as if preparing to curse him. But Webb spoke. Webb said, "I know who you are. I know what happened to your people. I know the pain you've suffered, and I understand why you're doing this."
The witch paused. For the first time, the witch seemed to hesitate. Webb continued, "But this curse is destroying innocent people. This curse is killing people who had nothing to do with the displacement of your people. This curse is turning you into the very thing you're fighting against." The witch was silent for a long moment, and then, in a voice that was layered and ancient, the witch spoke. "What would you have me do?" the witch asked. "My people are gone. My lands are gone. My sacred places have been desecrated. What justice is there for me?" Webb said, "I don't have an answer to that question, but I know that killing innocent people won't bring your people back. I know that destroying caravans won't restore your lands. I know that vengeance won't heal your wounds." The witch was silent again, and then she said something that would change everything. The witch said, "I am tired. I am tired of hunting. I am tired of cursing. I am tired of being consumed by rage and grief. But I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to rest." Webb said, "Then let me help you. Let me help you find peace. Let me help you find a way to honor your people without destroying innocent lives." And in that moment, something extraordinary happened. The blood moon witch's form began to change. The black eyes began to fade. The blood-red aura began to dim. The witch was beginning to lose her power. But before the transformation could complete, something else happened. A group of soldiers, led by Colonel Blackwood, arrived on the trail. Blackwood had followed Webb, determined to kill the Blood Moon Witch. Blackwood ordered his soldiers to open fire. The soldiers fired their weapons at the witch, and this time something different happened. This time, the bullets didn't pass through the witch. This time, the witch was vulnerable. The witch screamed, a scream so terrible, so filled with anguish and despair, that it echoed across the desert like the cry of a dying animal. And then the witch was gone. She simply vanished, as if she had never been there at all. Dr. Webb fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. He had been so close to finding a solution. He had been so close to ending the curse peacefully. But Blackwood's intervention had destroyed that possibility, and the Blood Moon Witch was gone. But was she truly dead? Or was she simply dormant, waiting for the next blood moon to return?
Chapter 5. The Legacy. After the confrontation with Colonel Blackwood, the Blood Moon Witch disappeared. The curse seemed to end. Caravans began to travel the Santa Fe Trail without incident. Merchants began to return. The economic impact of the curse began to diminish. But the question remained, was the Blood Moon Witch truly dead? Or was she simply resting, waiting for the right moment to return? In the years following the confrontation, Dr. Webb continued his research. He interviewed survivors. He collected accounts. He tried to piece together what had happened to the Blood Moon Witch. And Webb came to a conclusion that disturbed him greatly. Webb concluded that the Blood Moon Witch was not dead. Webb concluded that the witch was still out there, still existing in some form, still waiting. Webb's theory was based on several pieces of evidence. First, there were occasional reports of sightings. Travelers reported seeing a figure on the trail under the light of the full moon. The sightings were infrequent, but they were consistent. Second, there were the dreams. Merchants and settlers reported having vivid, terrifying dreams during the full moon. Dreams in which they saw the blood moon witch. Dreams in which the witch spoke to them, warned them, threatened them. Third, there was the pattern of deaths. Even though the major curse seemed to have ended, there were still occasional deaths on the Santa Fe Trail. Deaths that occurred during the full moon. Deaths that had no apparent cause. Deaths that seemed to be the work of a supernatural force. Webb theorized that Blackwood's attack had wounded the Blood Moon Witch, but had not killed her. Webb theorized that the witch had retreated to some other realm, some other dimension, some place between the physical world and the spiritual world. And Webb theorized that the witch was waiting for her wounds to heal, waiting for her power to return, waiting for the next opportunity to emerge and continue her curse. But Webb also theorized something else. Webb theorized that the witch was changing. Webb theorized that the next time the witch emerged, she would be more powerful, more intelligent, more difficult to defeat. Webb's final journal entry, written in 1890, just before his death, contained a warning. Webb wrote, "The Blood Moon Witch is not dead. She is dormant. She is waiting. And when she returns, she will be more terrible than ever before. The Santa Fe Trail is not safe. The curse is not ended. It is only sleeping." In the years following Webb's death, the Santa Fe Trail continued to be used, but with caution. Merchants began to avoid traveling during the full moon. Settlements began to organize protective rituals. Native American tribes began to speak openly about the Blood Moon Witch, no longer hiding the truth about her origins and her purpose. And the occasional sightings continued. Travelers reported seeing a figure on the trail, a figure that appeared under the light of the full moon, a figure that whispered curses into the night. But the major curse never returned. The large-scale destruction never happened again. It was as if the Blood Moon Witch was content to haunt the trail, to remind travelers of her presence, to warn them of the consequences of desecrating sacred lands. Some say that the Blood Moon Witch is still out there. Some say that she's still waiting for the right moment to return. Some say that on certain nights, when the moon is full and blood red, you can still see her figure on the Santa Fe Trail, watching, waiting, remembering. And some say that if you travel the Santa Fe Trail during the full blood moon, you might see her. You might see a tall, impossibly thin figure with completely black eyes and a blood-red aura. You might hear her voice, layered and ancient, speaking words in a language you don't understand. And if you do, you should remember the warning that Dr. Marcus Webb left behind. The Blood Moon Witch is not dead. She is dormant. She is waiting. And when she returns, she will be more terrible than ever before.
Epilogue. The mystery remains. The story of the Blood Moon Witch of the Santa Fe Trail raises questions that we may never be able to answer.
Was she truly a supernatural entity? Was she a woman driven to madness by grief and rage? Was she a force of nature, a manifestation of ancient spiritual power? Or was she something far more complex, something that existed between the physical world and the spiritual realm, neither fully alive nor fully dead? What we do know is that the legend has endured for over a century and a half. What we do know is that people continue to report sightings of a figure on the Santa Fe Trail under the light of the full blood moon. What we do know is that the Blood Moon Witch has become one of the most persistent and terrifying legends of the American frontier. Dr. Marcus Webb's final journal entries suggest that he believed the Blood Moon Witch was not truly defeated by Colonel Blackwood's attack. Webb theorized that the witch had simply retreated, wounded but not destroyed, waiting for her power to return. And the evidence seems to support Webb's theory. In 1895, 12 years after the confrontation with Colonel Blackwood, a merchant named Samuel Price was traveling the Santa Fe Trail during the full blood moon. Price reported seeing a figure on the trail, a tall, impossibly thin woman with completely black eyes and a blood-red aura. Price managed to escape, but his caravan was destroyed. All of his supplies were lost. 2 of his men died of unexplained causes. In 1912, a group of settlers reported seeing the Blood Moon Witch near the town of Las Vegas, New Mexico. The figure appeared under the light of the full blood moon, and the settlers reported feeling an overwhelming sense of dread and terror. One settler, a man named Robert Caldwell, fell ill immediately after the sighting and died 3 days later. The doctor could find no physical cause of death. In 1935, during the height of the Great Depression, a family of migrants was traveling the Santa Fe Trail. The father of the family reported seeing a figure on the trail under the light of the full blood moon. He described the figure as a woman with completely black eyes and a blood-red aura. The family managed to escape, but the father was haunted by the encounter for the rest of his life. He reported having recurring nightmares in which the Blood Moon Witch spoke to him, warning him, threatening him. And the sightings have continued into the modern era. In 1987, a woman named Jennifer Martinez was driving along Route 25, which follows the path of the original Santa Fe Trail. It was a night when the moon was full and blood red. According to Martinez's account, she saw a figure standing on the side of the road, a tall, impossibly thin woman with completely black eyes and a blood-red aura. Martinez was terrified. She accelerated her car and drove away as fast as she could. But in her rearview mirror, she saw the figure standing in the middle of the road, watching her car disappear into the distance. Martinez reported the incident to the police, but they found no evidence of anyone on the road. They suggested Martinez had been tired, that she'd hallucinated the figure. But Martinez knew what she'd seen. Martinez knew that the Blood Moon Witch was real. In 2003, a paranormal investigator named Dr. Sarah Chen decided to investigate the legend of the Blood Moon Witch. Chen spent weeks researching the historical accounts, interviewing descendants of survivors, collecting evidence. And then, on a night when the moon was full and blood red, Chen decided to travel the Santa Fe Trail herself. According to Chen's account, which she recorded on video, she saw the figure. She saw a tall, impossibly thin woman with completely black eyes and a blood-red aura. The figure appeared on the trail ahead of Chen's car. Chen managed to record several seconds of video before the figure vanished. The video shows a shadowy, indistinct figure on the trail, but it's difficult to make out specific details. The figure appears to be looking directly at the camera, directly at Chen.
and then the figure is gone. Chen's video has been analyzed by numerous experts. Some believe it's evidence of the Blood Moon Witch. Others believe it's a hoax or a misidentification. The truth remains unclear. But what we do know is this: the legend persists. The sightings continue, and the Blood Moon Witch remains one of the most mysterious and terrifying entities ever to haunt the American frontier. If you ever find yourself traveling the Santa Fe Trail on a night when the moon is full and blood red, I would offer you this advice: stay alert, stay aware, and if you see a tall, impossibly thin woman with completely black eyes and a blood-red aura, do not approach her. Do not engage with her. Simply leave the area as quickly as possible. Because the Blood Moon Witch is still out there. The Blood Moon Witch is still waiting, and the curse of the Santa Fe Trail has never truly ended. It has only been sleeping. Some say that one day, when the time is right, when the blood moon rises over the desert one more time, the Blood Moon Witch will emerge in full force. Some say that she will reclaim the Santa Fe Trail. Some say that she will complete the curse that was interrupted by Colonel Blackwood's attack. And some say that when that day comes, the entire American Southwest will be consumed by the curse, that the desert will become a wasteland, that no one will be able to travel safely through the region. Whether these predictions are true or simply the ravings of those obsessed with the legend, we may never know. But what we do know is this: the Blood Moon Witch remains one of the most compelling and terrifying mysteries of the Old West. This has been Mysteries of the Old West. Thank you for joining us as we explored the darkness of America's frontier. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next investigation into the paranormal mysteries of the Old West. Until next time, stay safe, stay skeptical, and remember, some mysteries are better left unsolved. Some curses are better left undisturbed. But on the Santa Fe Trail, under the light of the blood-red moon, the witch is still waiting, and she is still hungry.